Hello and welcome to another session of our Travel Talk series. Today I'm welcoming to our session here Sujin, who's joining us from US. Hi Sujin. Today we're discussing a very exciting location. It is considered to be one of the oldest cities in the Western Hemisphere and a major food destination. Here is a huge foodie, and she's going to tell us about this exciting destination, which is Mexico City. Welcome to the session, Sujin.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to talk about the Mexico City.
Sujin, before we start talking about Mexico City, which is very dear to you, we
Yeah.
would like to get to know you a little bit more. Tell us where you're from and how did you end up moving to Mexico City?
Okay. So right now I'm living in New York. I've been here since 2007, so I would consider myself a New Yorker. Prior to that, I grew up in LA and I was born in Seoul. Those were the, three very major cities. In 2022, I went to Mexico City for the first time. So it had been 15 years in New York. I visited with no intention of moving, even though I always knew I wanted to live abroad and especially live somewhere where I would learn a new language and have an adventure, just like when I picked up everything and left to move to New York. But when I went to Mexico City, it was just to sort through some things, visit a friend, and stop by a city. Actually, I was going to a surf retreat in Puerto Escondido, and Mexico City was just a pit stop. And then when I was there for a few days, venturing around by myself, because it was solo, and then I met a friend there. The beauty of the city, everything, it really struck me. And then I went to my surf retreat, and then I came back for a few more days. I extended the layover just to be in that city for a little bit longer. I was really taken by it. And of course, I am a foodie. The food just blew me away. I couldn't believe the smells you would just smell walking on the street. And when I say like nearly every street food vendor is going to be amazing food, especially if like you love Mexican food and can't have access to the good stuff. It's unbelievable and so affordable, so everyone can really enjoy it. After I left, I went back a couple months later for a full month and I worked remotely. I just wanted to see what that was like day to day. This is when I started to meet people that lived there and really just started to explore the neighborhoods and again, the food. And I always was curious about places that people that lived there knew about, not just the places you would Google or would be on lists. Maybe because I've lived in a city where there's always new hot spots popping up here and there. It's New York, right? There's all these new restaurants and trendy places. But really, my favorite places are the ones that have been around for a while that might not be a big tourist attraction. So those are the places I was really interested in and ended up finding. So yeah, it was really fun. After that, a couple weeks after I came back from that second trip, I was like, maybe this is the place I was thinking about moving to. I just didn't know it until now. 6 months later, I gave myself 6 months to do the big move, an indefinite time to move.
Yeah. And then how long were you there?
I was there for a year and a half. I came back for personal reasons. I have a partner that lives in the States. The relationship didn't start until halfway in, and then I realized, you know what, this is a little more challenging than I would like to do that. So I came back, but I love New York, so it wasn't difficult. And I feel like I can always go back to Mexico City. It's another reason why moving there, it was ideal because my parents are in LA. My friends are in New York in the middle and a manageable flight between those cities. So it was really easy to go back and forth and also just be somewhere so different. So yeah, I was there for a year and a half.
That's quite a long time to get to know a city. So before we start talking about Mexico City itself, I want to know a little bit more about you as a traveler. Where did you begin your travel journey?
My very first solo trip was at the age of 40. And yeah, as somebody that I think I've always known that I wanted to travel. When I was in college, this is when Anthony Bourdain was starting to become pretty big. I would watch him religiously and feel like that's what I want to do, which is traveling, but also traveling to places we might not really know about that aren't super glamorous. He's sitting and breaking bread with real people and talking about real things, but eating beautiful food. That's what I want to do. But of course, I didn't really think about that being a possibility, and social media wasn't really a viable career option at the time. I wasn't in a place financially to be traveling on my own because recovering from college debt and moved to New York. I quit my job and my career, started all over again in one of the most expensive cities in the world. So this dream of traveling alone wasn't quite something that I can achieve. And then 2020 happens, as we all know, and this is right before I turned 40. I finally recovered from all the financial stuff. I was in a good place, but this is why, like, I thought I was freaking out before going to Mexico City. I was like, is this the right time for me? And then I was like, when is gonna be the right time? My first solo trip was 2 years prior to that. I booked a trip to Europe. I went to 5 different cities on my own and it changed everything. I'd always wanted to travel alone. If you've never done it before, you have to get yourself psyched up to do it. I was nervous, but excited. So yeah, I just took 4 to 5 weeks off and traveled. I went to Lyon, Zurich, Berlin, London, Paris, Lisbon, and Porto, all on my own. After that, I just continued to travel and wanted to document. I was excited to show this adventurous travel expat life, nomadic life from someone, and from my perspective and my world, and someone that maybe isn't in there like just freshly out of college. So I was really excited to do that and share that part. One of my first YouTube videos, I talked about moving abroad in my 40s. And that was got a lot of responses from people that are like, oh, I've always wanted to do that. And I thought it was too late. Or traveling alone at this age. That first trip got me going, and I just wanted to keep traveling. Since then, I've just been traveling a lot, impromptu trips. If someone's, hey, we want to meet in this country, I'm like, sure, let's do it. Going on trips for my birthday, I started to become a tradition where it was always by myself. It was like a treat that I did for myself. So that's another thing that I really love doing. So yeah, that is my history. Very short, but
That's such an inspiring story that you have. You mentioned growing up, you always thought that's something that you would do. And then things didn't work out, or you were always busy with something, whether it was paying off your debts or trying to make ends meet in a really expensive city. And then suddenly you have that realization that there's no more time to waste. Just go for it, right? Yeah, that's so inspiring. And I think that's what people relate with you as well. That a lot of people have this desire that they want to travel, but somehow we keep putting it off as it will happen like at some point later in life. I think the
yeah.
moment to realize is that it's now. Or
If you know, exactly. I actually was looking back on some old videos, and it was one of my first talking heads at the end of that first solo trip. And oh my God, it was painful to watch. It was one of my first videos, but I did say, when is it? The time is now. And I actually, with that trip, only had a few weeks to plan it and just winged it. And that's how I always envisioned my travel would be. Granted, I always have to make sure I have my accommodations lined up. But as far as anything else is concerned, let's just figure it out as we go. And having done that, I learned a lot about myself, that I can do it. And that even when you don't have a lot of time to plan, you'll be fine. And I think just experiencing it and taking the initiative and doing it. And that's exactly what I did with my move to Mexico. Once I was like, oh, yeah, I'm going to do it. Then I just made the plans. When I moved to New York, I decided I was going to do it, gave myself a month, did it, and figured it out after. Having survived that made me realize that even though the move to Mexico was going to be hard, I was going to be fine, and that no matter what, I was going to come out of it better.
you realized your own strength to adapt and live in a new location.
Yeah. Beautiful
Yeah.
location. So I chose a really great one.
So when you went on that month-long trip to Mexico City, the exploratory trip, what were you doing then? What were you trying to map about the city in that first month of figuring out whether you wanted to move there or not?
Yeah, so I had just started a new job. I was working full time remote. So I was at home. I love to walk everywhere. If a city is not a walkable city, I tend to travel to walkable cities. I would say Mexico City is one of the most walkable cities. When I tell other New Yorkers that, they're like, wait, what? Because New York is one of the most walkable cities. No, Mexico City is one of the most walkable cities I've ever been in. I would walk miles every day, and it felt like nothing. It was Just what I did, I would take new routes and see what popped up, especially with food. One of my favorite spots after I lived there for a year was a street food vendor, not even on Google Maps, that I just happened to find. That place blew up. I hope they're doing really well. Well, I've sought that place, that little location out because it's not even a store or anything, a restaurant. But that's what I would look for. You would just meet people and go to whatever small events and language exchanges and stuff. But I keep things pretty small scale, especially when I'm really trying to learn about a city. I tend to shy away from tourist attractions. I did go to museums and other tourist things, but it wasn't where I naturally get drawn to. I would go if someone else wanted to go. I enjoy myself, but really I'm observing the people vibe. I'm feeling the vibe. I love people watching. One of my favorite things in Mexico City, and this is all going to tie into where I think everyone should start, and it is Condesa. I stayed there on my first visit, and I remember that moment when I opened the door to walk around. It felt like I was in a dream. It was insanely gorgeous. A few blocks from where I was, I just happened to walk by this park. And I couldn't believe this park. It's not only just breathtakingly gorgeous because like the plant life, it's just unreal. But there's this little area, like this concrete center where kids were playing and dogs, skateboarders and jugglers, people doing like martial arts, just like people just living there in this beautiful setting, just living their lives. And I just
Mhm.
sat there and observed, and I was like, this is what I'm gonna do every day that I'm here. It is everyone's favorite park. It is beautiful and absolutely one of my favorite places to be in the entire city. So yeah, that's what I did. I just took in the culture by observing and walking around.
It looked like a place you could imagine yourself living in based on the
Yeah.
friendliness of the people and the environment in general.
Yeah, and learning the language, at first it was a little intimidating. I took French in high school, so that was my foundation, aside from Korean and English. It wasn't as hard as I thought, and what made it easier was that everyone was so kind and encouraging. It made you want to learn and
Mm.
feel okay with trying because a lot of times we're just nervous to even try because we feel really embarrassed. But anywhere you go, if you just put in the effort, people will be patient and they'll help you. It made me excited to learn the language thing that I learned in that month that would lead me to the decision of moving there because I'm like, this will give me an opportunity to learn this language.
What
Yeah.
was the weather like when you went during this 1 month when you were exploring?
Oh, it was gorgeous. Spring is the best time in Mexico City. In Fahrenheit, it was always in the high 70s, cool and sunny.
Mm.
Mornings, nights get chilly, but it was always beautiful and sunny. And there's so much green everywhere, and it's so lush that I was just walking all the time. Aside from a light jacket or that I maybe would
Mm.
throw on at night or like a sweater, it was just comfortable just wear like t-shirt and jeans and just walk around. I was there, I believe it was, I first went there in March and then I went back in May. And May, it leads into summer, and summer is the wet season. So there were a few showers coming through. It's almost at the same time of day, late afternoon, that the clouds roll in. It rains briefly and then it stops. But the temperature is never too cold or too hot. It's always pretty nice. It was beautiful when I was there. So spring.
So,
Spring is the best time to go. Absolutely the best time to go.
and later on, did you find out that it has cold winters or anything?
It's not as cold as New York, but most of the buildings don't have central heat or cooling systems. The walls aren't really insulating. It just feels colder sometimes because of
Mm.
that. So in the winter, sometimes it would go as low as 7 degrees at night. So when it does get to that point and you don't have heat, that's really cold. In the winter, I would say the highs would get up to 15. And with the sun, it feels warmer. But at night, in the mornings, it would be really cold. And I remember not
Chilly.
packing my winter clothing when going to Mexico City. I would just wear layers and layers. The winters do get cold. But if you are staying in a newer building, a newer hotel, I think that they're maybe more built, but it's really those more modern newer places, nearly all the places. Most people will have a space heater or whatever, but Yeah, you
Hmm.
need to bundle up.
So travelers should definitely plan their trip either in the spring, summer months, or they should carry winter gear with them to be able to tolerate the weather.
I would say spring and fall. Summer is rainy. It's not
Hmm.
cold, but it's still raining. I personally love being out when it's sunny. Spring is high season for a reason. And fall is October, November is pretty nice. September, October,
Hmm.
November is pretty nice. It's still rainy. I think the rainy season might be the toughest for me. At least in the winter, it can still be sunny. So even if you bundle up, you can walk outside. You can also be in a newer building and be
Hmm.
warm. But when it's raining, it can be tough. But yeah, the plus side is though, there's so many things everywhere that once it starts raining, you just run into a cafe or into a shop or there's awnings and people just ride it out and you can just sit out and enjoy a coffee or a pastry. And the pace in Mexico, at least compared to New York, is so different. People really stop and enjoy things there. And so that's really nice. You'll see when you walk through Mexico City, there's all these points where you can sit, like benches or tiny parks meant for you to enjoy what's going on around you. I think that's really beautiful.
Sounds lovely. When you did finally move to Mexico City, what were the spots that really you were drawn to, or which were the ones that you kept going back to during your 1.5 years of stay over there?
I'm just going to bring back, so it's Parque Mexico in Condesa, and that is where I would always go. And it's in actually one of the videos that I sent you where there is a group of people dancing in a dance class. On weekends, it's the perfect place to go because it's not only are you in this beautiful park, but everyone is there. There's these sometimes free, maybe donation-based dance classes of 30 people, and you just see them in all different ages, just dancing, bachata or salsa, and a bunch of like dog training classes, and there's just so much going on surrounding it. There's so many beautiful bakeries and coffee shops. It was a common meeting point. Actually, there's a dog park right below it too in Mexico City, maybe in Mexico, but I only know Mexico City has a dog. The dogs run the city. It is amazing to see. A lot of them are off leash. They're so unaffected, so unamused by humans. They're just walking around like this is life. And it's just so beautiful to see. So it's just like seeing that community come together. Yeah, it was a common meeting point for anybody. It's like, yeah, let's just meet in Condesa, let's meet in Parque Mexico, and then we'll go from there. And the few neighborhoods that I really like. And what else is there? I really loved Cine Tonala. So that is a hidden gem. Not super hidden, but I don't know a lot of people that visit Mexico City that go there, but it's tucked away. It's an old theater with a rooftop open air bar strung up with lights. Most of the people there are people that live there or Mexican. It was one of the places I would go to by myself just to have a mezcal and sip it while I sit on the roof. They have independent films and foreign films. Now, if you don't understand Spanish, you're gonna have to watch the film in your native language because it's gonna have Spanish subtitles. That Cine Tonala is one of my favorite spots to go if I wanted to watch a movie or have a drink with somebody. And the weekend markets are so beautiful, so much fun. You get to see local artists on a free Saturday. I would go by myself and walk around. And yeah, it just was always like a beautiful day and get some street food and just look at the crafts and art. And yeah, those are my favorite things to do. There's always food.
All of these things that you're describing, they're very people-centered. The markets and even the park that you mentioned, it barely sounds like a park. I imagine park with more plants than people. But this
Yeah.
one sounds like a hub of activity, like life's happening in the parks.
In this one in particular, it's green and lush, but there's tiny paths that kind of weave through it. But then there's a center, like a circle with
Hmm.
that like is paved. This is where people sit in that circle. It's a small part of the park, but it is where people stop. And I've run into a lot of people there just randomly, just because this is where people go. When my parents visited, I took them there, and everyone's just so blown away by the greenery, like all the plant life. But I so this is maybe it's just a personal thing for me because what I love about travel and going to any city is the people. I tend to gravitate towards places and activities where I can observe that and take that in. So that is, I know not everyone enjoy or is prizes that. So in which case, like there are plenty of places to go. If any of my friends were visiting and they wanted to go to a tourist attraction, I would always take them to the Anthropology Museum. That is by far my favorite museum. It's gorgeous. It's in
Hmm.
the biggest park in Mexico City. It's bigger than Central Park. It's Chapultepec, and that is where you can find a lot of museums. And you go on a Sunday, there's like huge fairs going on, and it's just like a lot going on. So that's another place, more ground that it covers and a lot more going on. So I definitely have to be in a different mindset to go. There's always some kind of event going on. There's their castle and the museum. It is a place where people do go to enjoy. The Frida Kahlo Museum is a famous one. I think it's gorgeous. Absolutely enjoy going to that. There are like a lot of cultural landmarks.
There are definitely a lot of museums to see in Mexico City, for sure.
Yeah, and I'm not a huge museum person, but I've been to quite a few. There's one that I haven't gone to. It's the Luis Barragan house. I could not figure out how to get tickets to this thing because every time I go online, it would say it's sold out. But then
Oh.
turns out the trick is you have to just go. And yeah, but it's one of the most famous architects in Mexico, and his home has been turned into a museum. It's so beautiful, and I really want to go. So it's one of those things I'm like, it's on my like list of like when I go back, definitely gonna go. And my friends, yeah, you just have to go. Another place I really loved going to, it's a little further south from where everything is, but it's where the Frida Kahlo Museum is. Coyoacan is the neighborhood, and it's really gorgeous. A lot of people really love going over there and just spending the day. Just really beautiful and charming. The food market there is one of my favorites, and they have just it's just a little like less of that tour. There's fewer tourist attractions except for that Frida Kahlo Museum, which you have to book tickets in advance for. It really maintains that kind of charm and neighborhood feel.
So apart from the attractions themselves, the neighborhoods are also something that would in themselves just
And I did stick to Roma. There's Roma, like Norte and Sessa, and these are all the most like commonly traveled to by tourists because there's just more people there. They're more like maybe more English speaking there. So if it's your first time, it is just this is where I would go and where I stayed. I would venture out from time to just further out, but I think about it with New York where I am in Manhattan or Brooklyn pretty much. There's places outside of it and I'll venture from time to time, but I stay here and there's so much to see here. If it's a first time experience, those three neighborhoods are definitely where I would stay and there's plenty of things to see.
I think it's time for us to now talk about the food and which neighborhoods are the ones where one goes for the food.
I guess it depends on what you're looking for. I'll start with what I gravitate towards, and that's the street food or like the little shops, like where you get just the home cooked feeling. So I think with street tacos, you can pretty much go anywhere, but wherever you see lines of people that live and work around there, those are the really good places. One that I'll just call out is in Juarez, which is a little north, but still close to everything. And it's called Taqueria La Miranda. I was taken there by a friend who lived around there and it was totally off the tourist path. And it was just lines of people that were just there to eat the good food, and the portions were good. It was also so good. My mouth is watering. Those are the places I really loved going to. Another dish that you have to have when you're there is pozole, which is a stew, one of their pride and joys. And there are a lot, but the one that I love that I found when I posted about it, I had Mexicans respond, finally, people posting about real Mexican food. I was like, okay, good. It means I did good, but it's pozole de Moctezuma. I'll share this with you later so you can leave it in the notes, but it is one of the best things I've ever had. So delicious and very tucked away. It's just off of a highway. And I'd probably say take an Uber there. Like just you can get lost and there's not much going on, but one of the best pozoles you'll ever eat. If you like the fancy stuff, you go to Polanco. That's where all the Quintonil and what's the other one that everyone goes to? Pujol. So that's where all those top 10 restaurants that you have to book months in advance are. I have been to a couple of those. I prefer the other stuff. I think one of the tips I wanted to say was if it's your first time, you can skip Rosetta. But there is a restaurant called Contramar, which is a seafood restaurant that everyone's, is it worth going to? Yeah, it is. Everyone that's been there says it is. It's not in Polanco. It's not super fancy. It's in between, but you'll be able to do walk-ins at the right time. It's worth checking out. Get the tuna tostada. Yeah, I think like getting a feel for the local foods is probably what I'd recommend. And going to any park, festival, like any event, which you'll often see, like you'll see street food there. They'll have really good street food. Juarez is where all the historical, it's like the historical center. There are a ton of great taco shops there. A ton. Like you can go on a block if you just Google tacos, there's a bunch of them. That is a good place to go. Let me think of one in particular. It has a green chorizo taco. I'll tell you when I think about it because I went taco hopping in this part of the city and did 6 or 7 different places just within a few blocks from each other. Two places that I would say are must visits if it's your first time. One is Lucha Libre, which is the wrestling. It's masked wrestling and it is for tourists, but also for locals. You see such a mix of both that it just really it's just so fun and you get immersed in this huge stadium and you'll hear dads and their kids yelling at their favorite wrestlers in Spanish, ordering big things of beer and eating snacks, and it's just such a fun experience. But at that entrance of the big stadium, there's two, the bigger one, there's these tacos, and it blew me away. It was like one of like my favorite things I'd ever eaten. I was like, all right, the taco stand in front of Lucha Libre, hands down, one of like top 10 is pretty good, right? And then the other one is La Lagunia. Now, La Lagunia is the big Sunday flea market. I would say if crowds make you nervous, and then maybe it's not, it is, you have to have your wits about you when you go because it is like every vendor, like spanning for blocks and blocks. There's haggling, a lot of Spanish speaking. You just have to be mindful of the things that are on you. When you travel, you just have to do that. But so much food everywhere. You walk, grab snacks, and eat. It's an event. Mexicans go to have a boozy Sunday and walk around, and there's music everywhere, and yeah, just really good food. So things like that, you'll just always find really good stuff.
I think if someone's traveling for just a week or two, each meal that they have is going to be with taco.
It should be.
It
There's
should be.
plenty of other things. So Mexico has amazing pastries. I did not know that. I actually don't like desserts. I don't like pastries, really. I don't care about them. But I found myself always wanting to go to a bakery there. Really delicious Mexican pastries, the concha. Just says, what did my friend describe it as? She said it was like but it is kind of crumbly, but also soft, and it looks like a concha shell. I think that's why they call it that. But it's really delicious. You can find that anywhere. It's really cheap, really cheap. But yeah, bakeries are great. The coffee is great. So yeah, like so many places and opportunities to just stop and enjoy the setting. And so you go for tacos, you go for whatever fancy meal, and then like break for a coffee. Just be prepared to consume a lot because it's so delicious, so affordable. Yeah, I to plan my whole itinerary on food, but it'll be so easy and
Mhm.
endless in options.
Yeah, there are plenty of options, even in the neighborhood shops. Any one of them which has a queue probably means that the locals are flocking there.
Oh yeah,
And
just observe what kind of queue it is. It's a good sign when it's clearly people getting off work and going to this one place that
Mhm.
everyone in that neighborhood depends on to deliver good food. I on those more than the high tourist destinations that are catering to the tourist palate. I
Mhm.
would go with the locals. And if Spanish isn't something you're comfortable with, just point and say, I want that. You could say yo quiero, which is very easy. They want to share their food. Everyone's very proud of it, as they should be. Basic Spanish is a good thing to try. It's good to show effort. But
Yeah, especially if you're going to local stalls, you need to know basic terms about how to ask for food, pay the
yeah.
money, and appreciate it as well.
My Instagram handle is The Wandering Korean. I will have a whole section on Mexico City of all the local spots that I've gone to, traditional home cooked things with Spanish speaking staff. It's not going to be super far out of the neighborhood. I do have a whole section, and I'm working on a guide, a Mexico City 5-day perfect guide. Feel free to check that out. I feel like I'm drawing a blank as far as neighborhoods because everything is so good. My favorite taco spot is in Coyoacan. It's Don Feo in the Mercado. It's a small market. It's only open 3 days a week between 7 and midnight. So people just line up and it's amazing. And I was probably me and my friend were the only non-Mexicans in that line. It can get a little confusing, but I have it in a post where it explains how to do it. Like you put in your name and stuff. You get out of your comfort zone when you have to order outside of the language that you're primarily speaking. For me, if you're going to a different country, I want to do everything I possibly can to experience the things I can't when I come back home. Oh, there are Mexican restaurants here and other foods, but when I travel, like I want things I can't get back at home. So
Yeah.
that's what I really focused all of my energy on when I was there.
Yeah. And the destination deserves it for sure.
Yeah, when you travel there, most people will be going to Roma and Esa and that Juarez area. And it's like a triangle. So you can really just walk and it's every neighborhood, even within the neighborhoods are so different just by taking a different turn. But yeah, you'll it's generally safe there to walk around and especially if you're solo.
Yeah. Since you just brought that up, a 5-day guide for Mexico City, is it possible to cover everything in 5 days?
No, I think for any city that's worth going to, you can't. But let's say you did only have 5 days. What could be the best way to get the most
Mm.
out of your experience?
Mm.
Of course, from a perspective of somebody's that really enjoy, like I think
Mm.
anyone that's following me understands that food is like important to
Yeah.
me, but you can't literally eat at every hour of the day. There's always things to do around those food places. So you go and kill time, digest, and then you go right back to the next food destination.
Yeah, from all the food and the various stalls and options that we have discussed, I think definitely 2 weeks is a minimum time that would be needed. Or one should plan multiple trips able to
Yeah.
try everything out.
I think 2 weeks is actually a really good amount of time to feel like you got the best out of it. But then you will want to come back and do more. Everyone's experience with Mexico City, it's so similar. It's just, like, yeah, I want to live there now. Everyone goes there and says that when they come back. More often than not, a lot of people are surprised. I was too. I don't even know what I expected. I heard really great things, but I think you just really have to see for yourself. My parents, the same when they visit. Wow, like we had no idea. And we just walked around. They live in LA around sun and palm trees all the time, but they're just like, this is great. They were a little nervous about me moving to Mexico, but yeah, they when they visited, they're like, okay, this is
I want to now ask about places to stay when one is traveling to Mexico City, when your friends visited or when your parents visited. What sort of accommodations did they choose, or what did you pick for them when they were visiting?
so it's fairly easy to find a place. There are plenty of hotels, plenty of Airbnbs. Prices are getting up there now because it's no secret Mexico City is an amazing place to visit. I've always stayed in Airbnbs and my friends have as well, but it can get tricky. One thing that I wish I knew is that there are a lot of street noises, noise pollution. There's a lot of construction and street noises because the walls are thin. You might get woken up. You might be kept up if you're in specific areas and neighborhoods. So my very first apartment that I lived in for the first 3 months,
Hmm.
I had to leave within two because I was in a very busy neighborhood with walls that were very thin. If you're visiting for the first time, I would pick a hotel and a newer one at that. Pick a quieter neighborhood, which would be Condesa. I actually put my parents up in a hotel in Condesa. I wrote down the name of it, Hotel Circulo Condesa. It was an affordable price and kind of tucked away, so there wasn't a lot of traffic. My parents were comfortable and they're light sleepers. They had a lot of space. I have had friends going back to the noise where they found an amazing place. It was beautiful. The pictures were great and
Mm.
then a rude awakening the next morning, actually that night. And people in the building stay up late. People love to drink and have a good time.
Yeah.
So it's something to keep in mind. Some of the newer hotels with maybe more sound walls. Sonder is a group of hotels that are throughout the world. They have a few locations, and I was very happy with how noise proof it was. Nido, Nido. I have not stayed there, but a friend suggested it, and the reviews are fantastic. When
Mm.
looking for a place, just read the reviews thoroughly. If you don't see a lot of reviews and it's a good price, I would actually skip it for a place that is reviewed. Just see people's accounts on there and pay attention to noise. Don't pay attention to people nitpicking at the tiniest things. If it's noisy, someone will write about it. Same thing with Airbnbs. Read the reviews. If it's not reviewed, I would not try to jump at the chance to if at a good deal, because once you're there,
Yeah.
you're not going to enjoy it. Yeah, I've actually bounced around three different apartments before I landed on my last one, my final one, which was
Mm.
great. I loved it. Amazing neighborhood. I was there for the last 8 months leading up to it. I was like going from neighborhood to neighborhood, building to building, because I had to learn the hard way about some of
Mm.
these.
Yeah, this is something that you can only realize once you are there. So
Yes,
that, yeah,
exactly.
yeah, the city is alive and vibrant. So the people are always out and about, I'm guessing, which is
Yeah,
why
yeah.
noisiness is an issue.
I think it's also mostly like people in the buildings. I felt like my neighbors in my first apartment were in my room. That's how the walls were. And then construction. So construction is everywhere. I think like all throughout Mexico too. Any place worth visiting, it's gonna be under development. So not just Mexico in a lot of places. But
Mm.
so that was rough for me. Like that apartment, actually, there was construction that started at 11 p.m. that went to 2 a.m. or maybe even later than that, very loudly. It's something that the buildings themselves don't have control over, right? So you never know when construction is going to pop up. So you want to make sure that your building is sound. I would recommend just walking a lot. I would pick a neighborhood that you would walk around a lot in rather than something that might be cheaper that's a little further out, because you'll end up spending money on cars anyway. So might
Mm.
as well find something, because it's so walkable, find something that is around stuff that you could just step out of the hotel, go get breakfast, go to the park or wherever
Yeah.
park this, and then take the occasional car to the museum or other place that's a little
Mm.
further out. But I would absolutely recommend that. And yeah, I would recommend, I normally don't recommend hotels over Airbnbs, but in this case, I will, just to be safe.
Yeah. In terms of walkability, which you were just saying is should be a criteria. What would be the most walkable neighborhood?
There's a street called Insurgentes that goes straight through. It
Mm.
is Do not be near that street. Don't stay near that. It is the loudest street I've ever been on. However, it does connect. It is like where everyone walks and goes through to work or whatever. It's the main line. Going off from there would be a good way to think about it.
Mm.
Condesa and Roma, if this is the diagonal, Condesa will be here and Roma will be here. As long as you stay around this area, you'll always be able to cross, go through that
Mm.
major avenue, Insurgentes, and then yeah, so just stay close to that main street, but not on the main
On it.
street. Be able to walk around and find a
Mm.
place that people like to stay is north of it, and that's closer to Centro, and it's busier. There are like clubs and bars, and it's for me like not I it's not for me because I want the trees and the beautiful colonial houses along with the cute little bars. If you want more city and more action, then you can go to
Mm.
Juarez as well. That is still all in this triangle. So as long as you stay there, I think walking. But I can't stress this enough. If it's your first time, just go to Condesa. Just most of it's nice. And I love my mornings personally. So I love to wake up, take a walk, grab a coffee. It's really conducive to that and very safe and quiet. It's a good place to start if you're there. If Spanish isn't a language you're speaking, you're worried about safety, you might be a solo female traveler, like that is definitely a safe place to start, and also really beautiful to
Mm.
capture that, and walkable to all the other places that or like really quick Uber ride to where the action is, like the bars. I would say start
Mm. Yeah. Those were all really good suggestions. I don't think anyone as a traveler would be able to look into these many aspects and dimensions while they're picking.
Yeah.
I'm really glad that we've been able to cover them today. You have shared your insights as a local.
I
Yeah.
ended up moving to Escandon, which is a beautiful neighborhood. I think a lot of people that have lived like expats and actually, yeah, like that have lived in Mexico end up going further south away from everything. It was a 10-minute walk to Condesa for me, like the park. So it's like quiet, it's more neighborhoody there and more Spanish speaking, but still really beautiful. So I chose that neighborhood so that I could be really close to Condesa, but it's still that proximity to that area.
So earlier you were saying about how Mexico City is a good place for solo travelers, and you just brought that up again right now. So I just want to know, what was it about the city that made you feel comfortable? It was with the people themselves, or were there any other aspects as well?
Yeah, definitely the people were a big part of it. When I went there, I think it was just how serene everything was. I already felt very safe. When you travel solo, I think the two biggest concerns is safety and loneliness. And with the safety part, I think as long as you, again, you have to just be aware, right? And I've lived in New York, so I think being somewhere here and thinking New York is very safe. It's just because I am aware that anything can happen at any given time. You never know, especially as a female. But when I was there, I felt so safe. It's also like knowing to trust your gut, right? Maybe don't go down that dark alley or street.
Yeah.
Staying around the neighborhoods that I was familiar with, but also the people, very helpful, very friendly and warm. Um, and like a deep, like enough of travelers around too that so like it's a good mix. At night, you just have to be a little bit more careful. I felt completely safe walking through Condesa at night. Women walking around alone, walking their dogs like, all the time. There isn't a huge nightlife scene in Condesa. There are some like restaurants who serve drinks and there's like where they're seating outside, but the bars are in Roma and Juarez. So when you have a lot of drinking going on, things can get a little dicey. At night, it's a little different, but these are all things that you just know, or you should if you don't. And as long as you keep those things in mind, I felt very safe. Everyone was so friendly. It was easy to not feel alone. I've been to different cities where no one even knew I
Mhm.
existed, which is fine for someone like me. I'm very introverted, but it is definitely a different experience. But in Mexico, it was very like friendly, involved. Even seeing the beautiful architecture and the trees and everything, it kept me like engaged, but like simultaneously relaxed too when walking around. So I never felt lonely. It's the perfect place to visit if you're going alone. There's plenty of things to do all the time and other solo travelers as well.
That makes a lot of sense. Just seeing people out and about, especially as a female, if you see women on the street doing their everyday activities, it helps you like things are okay. Everyone else is doing this as well.
Yeah, 100%. I've definitely found myself. There's like some cities, especially here, because I'm often in New York alone, right? When I'm like, oh, I'm the only woman on this train. I'm the only woman on this block. And then you start to feel a little nervous. But I knew a lot of women in Mexico City, and a lot of them lived alone. A lot of them traveled alone, and they felt safe. You just have to be aware of your surroundings, but as long as you are, it's a really wonderful place to travel to. And I think again, if you're staying at a hotel for the first visit, that could add an extra sense of safety just because you have someone there to answer your questions in case you don't know how to communicate or transportation or whatever it may be.
Are there any other things that travelers should know about before they visit Mexico City? Like,
One was the noise pollution. I wish I'd known about that. Yes, the nights and mornings get chilly. Bring a jacket. It gets cooler than you would think. On Sundays, there's this huge avenue called Reforma. It closes down so people can bike and walk. It's a really nice activity to do because everyone kind of goes and does it, but it also is around Centro and all that stuff. So if you wanted to go to a museum and just walk this Sunday, it's just like a really nice, beautiful activity to do that not everyone knows about. And then, oh, transportation. I really think just walking is the best. Ubers are pretty reliable and cheap. But and there's also an Eco BC, which is their bike share. And that's you just download the app and you can hop on the bike. There are very clear bike lanes. Actually, Mexico City, I read this article years ago that it's one of the most bike friendly cities because
Oh.
they're very clear bike paths and dividers or whatever you call them. I personally, I bike everywhere in New York, but I just prefer to walk everywhere. Yeah, that's just what I did. And oh, cash. Yes, bring cash. Most places take credit card, but one of the things that like will happen when you eat on the street, because a lot of places you eat outside, there are always street performers and entertainers, and they will come and entertain. And I've found myself like wishing I had cat because they some of these performers are really great. And please just give them something. Like so when you get like a little bit of change, just keep it in your pocket because the next time you eat, you will be like, oh, you'll pull it out and give whoever, but it will happen no matter what. If you're eating outside, someone will, it's just even like the relationship between these restaurants and anyone that's
Mhm.
a performer, they are always allowed to do that and you're enjoying that scene and the vibe and the music. And so keep a little bit of change on you. So if you're going to markets and stuff, cash is a good thing to have. But ATMs are everywhere. You won't have a problem with that. Yeah, and I think honestly, that's really it. I just learn basic Spanish phrases. You don't have to know that much. Showing that effort means a lot to people there. It's an amazing city. Trust your nose with the street food. Just follow your nose. It is really good. I know the tendency, like you are tempted to just make reservations everywhere and go to all these places, but there is such an abundance of beautiful like foods out there that you won't I'm just don't fill your itinerary up with reservations at restaurants. Maybe just a
Mhm.
few, but keep it open for the places that you walk past or you hear about that you just pop in and it's just amazing. And that those are the places you won't find anywhere else because it's so local and it's so authentic.
Yeah, those are all pretty good suggestions. So I have my last question for you now, Sujin, which is what would you tell someone to take back as a souvenir from Mexico City?
I actually never buy souvenirs. I think what a lot of my friends have taken back is mezcal, if you like liquor, but it's something that a lot of places just make in-house and it's
Mhm.
delicious. And there's like a lot of artisanal places that will package that up and anything like local crafts. There's a lot of beautiful markets where you can see the just handmade things and woven things. And I think if you go to, I would say for something like that, the San Angel market is local artists as opposed to places selling keychains and souvenirs. San Angel Mercado is on Saturdays near Coyoacan. Beautiful Saturday market, and you'll find so many cool things to bring home. And I think the only other thing, someone brought back Mexican chocolate. Apparently that's really good. I'm not a chocolate person, but that was like one of the things that my friends like, I gotta bring this back. I'm like, okay. But yeah, that's what I would say.
So thank you so much for joining me today for this conversation, Sujit. It's been a pleasure, and I hope that the viewers will find the discussion useful because we've covered a lot of ground in terms of the food they can have and the places, the neighborhoods to select for accommodation, and some great tips you offered about that. So thank you so much for that. And with that, I will sign off for today. Bye.